It's the Sports for Real with Coach Hall. And today I'm doing a recap of the NCAA Final Fours that occurred over the last couple of days. The finals have been set, and they're going to tip off tonight at 3 o'clock, or this afternoon at 3 o'clock, when you have Iowa taking on South Carolina. This is a rematch of the semifinals from a year ago, and there's going to be some fireworks in that one. Also, tomorrow at 9 o'clock, you're going to have Purdue taking on UConn. This is a game I expected to see. It has been the top two teams all year long and a good part of last year. The two best teams of NCAA basketball, and they finally meet. If you think about other sports like boxing, you rarely see the two best teams meet. But in this case, it's going to be epic battles in both cases, tipping off today at 3 o'clock in Cleveland. But before I get to that, let's find out or recap how they both got here. Um, South Carolina started all off by beating North Carolina State. The game was nip and tuck all the way. North Carolina State was really an underdog. They was kind of like Cinderella, and Cinderella took them very far, and it was also had them very competitive into the third quarter. But South Carolina slowly started to assert their dominance, and they pulled away from North Carolina State, and away went Cinderella. In the second game, Iowa got it on with UConn. UConn controlled the game most of the time. They had Caitlin Clark under control. I figured that Gina Auriemma would come up with a game plan to slow down Caitlin Clark, and he did. And for the most part, the first half, they pretty much shut her down. But being the great player she is, Clark bounced back and hit 21 points in the second half, and also some key three-pointers to keep her team competitive. But sadly, the game came down to officiating. UConn got a stop from UConn. UConn got a stop from Iowa, and they had one possession left to try to take the lead. This is after UConn had trailed by about 8 points with 3 minutes left, and being in the championship heart that they still have, even though they haven't won a championship in several years, they came to win this game. But the referees or the officials called an illegal screen. Now, think about this illegal screen thing. You can pretty much call illegal screen on a lot of these screens. A lot of times, those players just step out at the last second trying to prevent the defender from getting too close to the ball carrier. But this particular time, and with the situation on the line, a lot of people say that was a bad call. But according to the rules, it was a great call. It's just the timing was bad for UConn. And you can't say that it was not a good call. It's just that a lot of people didn't want you to play by the rules, but when the game is on the line, you want the players to decide it. Well, it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. You know, if you do it right all the time, and I'll put it this way: a better explanation for that is it's like you speeding down the highway. You know you're speeding, and you know most of the time you're not going to get caught. But when you get caught, you get mad. Well, it's the same situation with this illegal screen. That was clearly an illegal screen. As touchy as it might seem, you knew what the rules are, and you violated the rules, and you got caught at that particular time. It's just unfortunate that it came at that time. Just like when you're trying to get to work or some important event by a certain time, that's why you speeding and you get zapped by the cops. It throws everything off. That's unfortunate. Same kind of situation. But be that as it may, Iowa came down, sunk a shot, and it pretty much ran out the clock from there. And that put Iowa into the rematch with South Carolina. Now, yesterday, Purdue came out against North Carolina State. North Carolina State was a true Cinderella. They took on the world after, having to win 5 games in the ACC tournament. And they came right back and won their regional in the NCAA tournament. And now you're on the big stage with the 3 other best teams in the country. So regardless of how you got there, you still are one of the best teams. And it came down to using DJ Burns correctly. Burns, he's been getting the ball and he's been kicking the ball out and getting his teammates involved. I said to you before that if you're going to beat North Carolina State, what you had to do was pretty much let Burns go and do his thing and take away everybody else. So yesterday, that's kind of what happened. Painter, after the game, that's Purdue's coach, come out and said that he pretty much wanted to let DJ do his thing and take away everybody else. But DJ, he was kind of a little off yesterday. But the other DJ Horn, he played pretty well. Now, that's the thing. When you're a Cinderella and you upset your way all the way to a championship game or a championship situation, you're going to do one of two things. Either you're going to continue on doing what you did that got you there, or that glass slipper is going to break. Well, right now, North Carolina State getting that glass out of their heel because those slippers broke on them. But you can't take anything away from them because what they did was real. And a few more shots here and there, they would have been okay. But Purdue themselves, Zach Edey comes as advertised. The man can play some ball. But the thing is that Purdue, they didn't play necessarily a great game yesterday. They were kind of off a little bit. But the difference between this year and say last year, the key shots that they had to make when they needed to make them, they made them. Edey got some help, and it can't just all fall on him. It can't just all fall on him. And he did what he needed to do at the right time to keep his team in position to advance to the championship round. Bad little setup here. So anyway, let's try this. All right, I think I'm situated now. Just a little bit more light into the studio. Maybe that'll help. At least you can see me. So I don't know. So again, Purdue, the game they won yesterday is the same kind of game that they lost last year against Fairleigh Dickinson. And when you don't hit on all cylinders and the other team, they get more confidence as the game go along, you're in trouble as a favorite. And that's the kind of thing that's been happening to Purdue. But yesterday, they found a way to overcome it. They got some timely outside shooting. And with North Carolina State being a little bit of foul trouble, it hurt them down the stretch. And Purdue was able to pull away, kind of like in a way that South Carolina pulled away from the ladies' version of North Carolina State. Okay, so that brings us to the final game. UConn took on Alabama. I thought Alabama had a great shot to beat UConn, and the way they played the game, they didn't disappoint me. But it all came down to, well, first of all, they say that UConn pretty much an invincible team. They talking like this is the greatest team ever been put together and kind of almost invincible because of the scores they've been putting up on teams. That's all well and good. But I hadn't seen a team yet that couldn't be beaten. Just like I had never met a quarterback who couldn't throw off his back. So as much praise you might heap on somebody like a Patrick Mahomes, you put a hat on him, he going to the ground, he ain't throwing the ball. But anyway, UConn, they did show me championship medal. Alabama was right next to him all day. Well, we were even tied with like 12 minutes left at 56, and that's when the game kind of changed. Up to this point, Alabama's been hitting all those key shots, making plays, playing good defense to keep themselves in position to steal it in the end. Well, it was reversed this time. Alabama couldn't make any shots, and it seemed like UConn didn't miss any shots. So if you want to be a champion, you got to hit those shots when it counts the most. And they did that. Another thing, Klingon, he asserted his dominance right away early in the game. He swatted those Alabama shots right out of there. They had like 6 or 7 blocks. And then he backed it up on the offensive end by scoring down there too. But again, it came down to, I think Alabama was playing soft. A lot of times they would drive into the basket and then kick it out for a 3-pointer when they had a clear lane to the shot. They worried about the shot block. But what you need to do, like I saw Sears do a couple of times, you go in there and you throw your body around and draw some contact. They had Klingon, he had like 3 fouls. I mean, if you could have did that a few more times, maybe you get Klingon out of there. But Pringle, I had just bigged him up, talking about how you have to whip him because this man playing some ball. He didn't show me much last night. He was real quiet. Maybe he was intimidated by Klingon. Now, Klingon, the man is a very good defensive force. But at the same time, Alabama, you got to force the official's hand make them make a call. They did it a couple of times, but they didn't do it enough. And I just couldn't understand why we would penetrate the basket and kick out all the time. Now, that dude Nelson did what Pringle did the other night. He didn't even see Klinger. One time he went up over Klinger and dunked on him. Now he was a little bit far from the basket, but that was just to let Klingon know and let everybody else know that Alabama was going to be here to the end. And they would have been if they could have hit some timely shots. They just didn't have it down the stretch, and that allowed for UConn to pull away, and it make look like anybody looking at the final score like this was a blowout. Alabama was right there. They just didn't have enough in the end to stay close. So that brings us to our championship matchups. Today you're going to have the rematch between Iowa and South Carolina. A lot of talk last year from that game. It's motivated South Carolina to get back to where they were. Even if they had not been motivated by it, as good as they are, they would be in that position anyway. But if you listen to the post-game interview with Ashley Watkins, he's pretty much talking trash. Like they got this monster chip on his shoulder, like, and they're daring somebody to beat them off. But I look a little deeper than that. I look at the way South Carolina is playing, much in the way that LSU was playing. You know, they should have lost to UCLA, but they got hot in that fourth quarter, and they came back and they won that game. South Carolina pretty much got hot down the stretch against North Carolina State to pull their weight. So if you're really that dominant team, you need to put together 4 quarters. I don't know if South Carolina could do that. Secondly, it's going to come down to coaching. What kind of adjustments will Staley make based on what we saw from the game last year? Yeah, I know the personnel is a lot different, but a lot of the personnel is the same, mainly Raven Johnson. Johnson is not shooting a great percentage this year. And if you remember last year, Caitlin Clark backed off and let her shoot, and she froze. She didn't quite know what to do. And I told you what she should have done, just like Derrick Rose did in the championship game against Kansas back in '08, I believe it was. He showed you what to do. Last night, the adjustment that Alabama made to try to beat UConn's offense, they knew everybody else could hit those threes, and they know they had the inside presence. UConn did. So Alabama had to decide on what they wanted to do. Their decision was to let that freshman Castle leave him out there by himself because he's not known as a great shooter. Castle immediately recognized it, looked over to the bench coach to say nothing, fired up a three. Hey, you wide open. He did that 2 or 3 times. And that turned out to be very big for UConn because now Alabama had to change their strategy. So again, it comes down to coaching. What did Hurley do? Hurley let Castle shoot. Then he put the ball in Castle's hands for the pick and roll situation. The guy that Alabama wanted to shoot, well, now he's got the ball in his hands driving to the basket on the pick and roll. So now you got to change your whole setup if you're Alabama. It just so happened Castle was very effective in what they needed him to do, and it turned out to be the difference in the game. So now let's just say Castle would have froze like Raven Johnson did last year. Then UConn, they'd be on the couch with me today. But good coaching, good adjustments by the player, and you got a different situation. So that goes back to what Raven Johnson is going to do. Will Caitlin Clark, will they back off Johnson and see if she's going to be able to beat him this year? I don't know. I think the game was close last year because Iowa didn't have the support that they have in this year from people other than Caitlin Clark. And if they get support and Clark is able to score, I think South Carolina might be in a little bit of trouble here. Now, we've seen great teams over the years, going back to Houston. We talked about them last time. All those teams they had at Five Slammer Jammer, they should have won at least one championship. They didn't get any because somebody came up with a plan, the bounce went their way, and they lost every time. Could South Carolina be in this situation? And yes, I know South Carolina has a couple of championships already, and I still think they're the best team. But it's going to be up to Staley if she can devise a plan to slow Caitlin Clark. If she can slow Caitlin Clark or allow Caitlin Clark to just shoot and defend everybody else, it'd be the same kind of plan that Alabama thought they were going to do against UConn. It's what you needed to do to beat DJ Burns at North Carolina State. Will Staley try that against Iowa? Now, Ariema thought otherwise. Let's take Clark away and let's see if the other players can beat us. And he almost got away with that. But Clark, she got to holler at the right time, and it made all the difference. So what's next? Purdue and UConn, the two big fellas on the two best teams in the country for the past 2 years. Everybody in the world has already picked UConn to win this game because for whatever reason they think Edie is going to fall back. Now that all the pressure is off Purdue after what happened to them last year, they galvanized themselves. They have come together and they've got to the brink of winning the championship. So either one or two things are going to happen. Either they're going to keep moving forward or they're going to revert back to what that was before. Now, you might say that you saw a little bit of that yesterday when they struggled a little bit against North Carolina State. I say differently. There's no more pressure on Purdue. And when you got the championship right in front of you, hey man, it's time to go play. And I think what's going to happen is you still can't defend Edie. Is going to come down to who gets into foul trouble. It comes down to the officials again. Will they let them play or are they going to be calling everything? I think they have to let the big fellas play. Otherwise, it's going to defeat you know, it's just going to change the whole dynamic of the championship if you don't let these guys play. So having said that, Edie is going to take Klingon to the hole. But on the other hand, Klingon going to take him to the hole. And I think Klingon is going to get in a little bit of foul trouble with his block shots. Now remember, this guy, Edie, is 7'4". Klingon, he's not quite as tall, but he's tall enough to cause Edie some problems. But Edie's going to score on that offensive end. Klingon, he's a decent offensive player too. But I think the difference is going to come down to can Klingon stay out of foul trouble? And if he can't, it's going to make things very interesting. Now, UConn last night, they were very hot down the stretch. They didn't seem to miss any shots. Kind of remind me of what USC women did when they beat Baylor down the stretch. They didn't miss any free throws. And you're going to have that in the championship game to win. So what I like to see this game go into overtime. But I'm not going to make my prediction just yet. I'm still mulling it. But I did pick Purdue to win the whole thing before the tournament started. And as of right now, I don't see a reason to change that. But if I do come up with something else, I'm going to come back and tell you about it. But it all starts today with South Carolina and Iowa. Key points here, what adjustments will the coaches make, especially Staley, how will she handle Raven Johnson? Will she put the ball in Raven Johnson's hand, let her drive, instead of leaving her out there to freeze like she did last time? Remember, Johnson owned up to what happened last year, and she pretty much vowed that kind of thing. It'll be a different situation. So now we get to see if there's going to be a different situation. And early in the game, you're going to see just what takes place. So coaching is going to make the difference there. But I'm going to tell you right now, I think Iowa's going to knock South Carolina off, and it ain't going to be close. Why? Because they got that look in their eye. They got that cast of characters. And Caitlin Clark, in her last game, she might try to overpress early in the game, but I think she's going to go for at least 30. And South Carolina's going to have the hands full if those cast of characters are hitting shots. If they are, it's good night Gamecocks. And Iowa's going to win their first championship. So we might just be looking at a Big Ten double here. I have no bias whatsoever. It's just the way things play out. Just like the way North Carolina State, both their teams lost yesterday, and one of UConn's. So we couldn't see the UConn North Carolina State double for both games. So anyway, 3:00 today, Iowa and South Carolina are in Cleveland for the women's NCAA basketball championship. And I am going with Iowa against all odds, against popular opinion, against the grittiness, as you might want to call it, the extreme confidence of the Gamecocks. Well, I just think Iowa just might be the better team. It's all about team in sports. They got a great player. They got a great cast. South Carolina has great players, but we've seen in the past when they've been pressed, that cast does not step up. Now, he beat LSU a couple times. He beat LSU several times over the years. They're the best program in the SEC. But is the SEC overall as good as the Big Ten? That's a question to be answered. So this has been Sports for Real. Looking forward to a great championship day. We're out.